Have you ever felt that electric tension with someone you shouldn't want? That's exactly where I found myself 6 months ago, desperately avoiding eye contact with the woman who signed my paychecks. If you've ever been caught in that impossible situation, stick around, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to hear more stories that might just make you feel less alone in your complicated life. It started on a Monday. Don't the worst things always start on Mondays? I was running late for my first day at Horizon Publishing, coffee staining my freshly ironed shirt as I stumbled through the revolving doors. The elevator was closing, and I lunged forward, sticking my arm between the doors like an idiot. "Hold it, please," I called, more desperate than dignified. The doors bounced back open, and that's when I saw her. Dark hair falling in loose waves around a face that belonged in magazines, not corner offices. Eyes that seemed to see right through me, intelligent, perceptive, and somehow both warm and intimidating at once. "Cutting it close, aren't you?" she said, one eyebrow raised as I stepped inside. Her voice had a slight rasp to it, like someone who laughed often and deeply. "Traffic was brutal," I lied, trying not to stare at the way her charcoal gray suit complemented her olive skin. "Thanks for holding the door." She nodded, studying me with an intensity that made my collar feel too tight. "You must be James Chen, the new senior editor." My stomach dropped to somewhere around my ankles. "And you are?" "Eliza Winters. Your boss." She extended her hand, and when our fingers touched, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Something I definitely shouldn't feel for my superior, a jolt of awareness that made time slow down for just a heartbeat. That was the beginning of my 6-month campaign to avoid Eliza Winters at all costs. I became a master of evasion, a virtuoso of vanishing acts. I'd take the stairs when I knew she'd take the elevator, even though our office was on the 17th floor. I'd schedule my lunch when she was in meetings, eating sad sandwiches alone at my desk rather than risk running into her in the break room. I'd send carefully worded emails instead of stopping by her office. I volunteered for projects that required me to work from home or with other departments, becoming suspiciously enthusiastic about collaborations I would have normally avoided. It wasn't that I disliked her, quite the opposite. That was the problem. Eliza was brilliant in a way that made everyone else in the room feel simultaneously inspired and slightly inadequate. She had transformed Horizon from a struggling publisher into a digital powerhouse in just 3 years, navigating the treacherous waters of a dying industry with innovative strategies that competitors were now scrambling to copy. The team respected her, clients adored her, and I couldn't be in the same room without forgetting basic English vocabulary, which was particularly embarrassing for someone whose job involved mastery of language. "James, are you avoiding me?" she asked one day, cornering me by the coffee machine when I'd made the tactical error of assuming she'd be in a budget meeting. "What? No, of course not," I stammered, spilling hot coffee on my hand and barely noticing the burn. "Just busy with the Thompson manuscript. Those rewrites are killing me." She didn't believe me. I could tell by the way her eyes narrowed slightly, the same expression she wore when authors tried to explain why they couldn't meet deadlines, but she let it go. "The quarterly review is next week. I'll need your input on the new fiction lineup." "I'll email you my notes," I promised, already planning my escape route through the copy room. "I'd prefer to discuss them in person," she countered, her tone making it clear this wasn't a request but a directive wrapped in polite phrasing. "My office, Tuesday, 2 o'clock. That meeting never happened. A family emergency called her out of town, and I breathed a sigh of relief that made me feel like the worst person alive. Who feels relieved when their boss has a crisis? What kind of heartless monster was I becoming? Months passed this way, with me constructing an elaborate architecture of avoidance. The few times we were forced to interact, I kept things strictly professional, ignoring the way my heart raced when she laughed or how I noticed she always wore a small silver pendant shaped like a book. I pretended not to see how she stayed later than anyone else, the light from her office spilling into the darkened hallway as I slipped out at a reasonable hour. I acted as if I didn't hear the genuine passion in her voice when she defended a manuscript everyone else wanted to reject. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late, nearly 10 p.m. on a Thursday. A major manuscript had critical issues, and the author, a temperamental literary darling with a history of jumping ship, was threatening to walk. I had stayed to fix what I could, assuming everyone else had gone home hours ago. The office was that special kind of quiet that only happens after dark, when the phones stop ringing and the only sounds are the hum of electronics and the occasional distant siren from the streets below. I was hunched over my desk, eyes burning from staring at the screen, when I heard footsteps. Looking up, I saw Eliza standing in my doorway, her usual polished appearance slightly rumpled after what must have been a 14-hour day. Her blazer was gone, the sleeves of her silk blouse rolled up to the elbows, and her hair was pulled back in a messy knot that somehow made her look more approachable and more beautiful at the same time. "You're still here," she said, sounding surprised. The fluorescent lights had dimmed to their energy-saving evening mode, casting soft shadows across her face. "The Morrison manuscript is a mess," I explained, rubbing my eyes. "I'm trying to salvage it before tomorrow's meeting with the marketing team. If we lose him to Penguin, we lose the whole trilogy." She nodded, stepping into my office. Her perfume, something with notes of vanilla and amber, drifted toward me. "I saw your light on. Thought I was the only workaholic left in the building." "Pot, kettle," I said before I could stop myself, then winced at my own informality. To my surprise, she laughed, a genuine laugh that transformed her face and made my chest tighten. "Fair point. Have you eaten anything in the last 6 hours?" I hadn't, but admitting that seemed dangerous somehow. "I'm fine." "That's not what I asked." She leaned against my desk, closer than she'd ever been. I could see a small freckle near her collarbone that I'd never noticed before. "I ordered Thai food." "Too much for one person." "Pad Thai, green curry, spring rolls, the works." "I shouldn't." "James," she interrupted, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Why do you always run away from me?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy with all the things I couldn't say. That I found her intimidating in ways that had nothing to do with her being my boss. That sometimes when she spoke in meetings, I got so lost in the cadence of her voice that I missed what she was saying. That I was terrified of crossing lines that shouldn't be crossed, of ruining my career, her reputation, and the fragile professional respect we'd established. "I don't run away," I lied, the words tasting false even as I spoke them. "You do." She wasn't accusing, just stating a fact with the same directness she applied to everything. "For 6 months, you've been avoiding being alone with me. You take the stairs when you see me waiting for the elevator. You reschedule meetings when it would be just the two of us. You volunteer for projects that keep you out of the office." She tilted her head, studying me. "I want to know why." I stared at my keyboard, searching for words that wouldn't end my career. The cursor blinked on my screen, mocking my inability to articulate a coherent thought. "It's complicated." "Then uncomplicated," she challenged, pushing away from my desk. "In my office. 5 minutes. Bring your appetite, the food's getting cold." She walked away before I could respond, leaving me with a choice that felt monumental. I could make an excuse and leave. I could send an email in the morning apologizing for missing her. I could do what I'd been doing for months, run. Instead, I saved my work, straightened my tie, and walked the longest 30 feet of my life to her office. The door was open. She was standing by the window, city lights creating a halo around her silhouette. When she heard me, she turned, and the look on her face made my mouth go dry, expectant, vulnerable, and determined all at once. "You came," she said, sounding almost surprised. "You didn't give me much choice," I replied, trying for humor and failing. "You mentioned food, and I'm apparently easy to bribe." She smiled slightly, then walked to the door. I thought she was going to leave, but instead, she closed it. The soft click of the lock engaging seemed to echo in the quiet room. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Making sure we're not interrupted." She moved closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something subtle and warm that reminded me of old books and rainy days. "Now, tell me why you've been avoiding me." I took a deep breath, feeling like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. "Because I'm attracted to you, and you're my boss, and that's a complication neither of us needs. Because every time you walk into a room, I forget what I was saying. Because you're brilliant and intimidating and beautiful, and I'm trying to be professional, and failing miserably at it." I expected shock, maybe anger, or awkward dismissal. What I didn't expect was the slow smile that spread across her face, transforming it from merely beautiful to breathtaking. "That's funny," she said, taking another step toward me. "Because I've been attracted to you since you nearly broke your arm stopping that elevator, and you're my employee, and you're right, it is a complication. One I've been trying to figure out how to address for months while you've been doing everything possible to stay away from me." My brain short-circuited. "You, what?" "I thought you knew," she said, a hint of vulnerability creeping into her voice. "I thought that's why you were avoiding me, because you weren't interested and didn't want to deal with the awkwardness. I've been trying to give you space." I laughed, a sound of pure disbelief. "Not interested? Eliza, you're the most fascinating woman I've ever met. I've been avoiding you because every time you're near me, I can't think straight. I become the world's least articulate editor. It's embarrassing." Her eyes softened, the professional mask slipping to reveal something warmer underneath. And here I thought I was losing my touch. "Definitely not that," I assured her. "Your touch is, very much intact." I winced at my own awkward phrasing. We stood there, the air between us charged with 6 months of unspoken tension. I knew I should leave, that this conversation was already crossing lines, but I couldn't make myself move. It felt like gravity had shifted, pulling me toward her instead of toward the ground. "So what now?" I finally asked, my voice rough. "Now," she said, closing the final distance between us, "I'm going to do something I've wanted to do for a very long time. If you want me to stop, just say so." She reached up, her hand gentle against my cheek, and then she was kissing me. Soft at first, questioning, and then with growing certainty as I responded, pulling her closer, 6 months of restraint dissolving in an instant. Her lips were warm, tasting faintly of coffee and mint, and I felt dizzy with the realization that this was actually happening. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, she rested her forehead against mine. "That was..." "Yeah," I agreed, unable to find better words despite my supposed mastery of language. "This complicates things," she murmured, her fingers still tangled in my hair. "Completely," I agreed, my hands resting on the small of her back. "HR will have a field day." "Absolutely. We should probably stop." "Probably." Neither of us moved. I could feel her heartbeat, rapid and strong, matching my own. "Or," she said slowly, "we could figure it out. Together. If you want to." I pulled back slightly to look at her, this woman who had occupied my thoughts for months. Her eyes were uncertain now, a vulnerability I'd never seen before. "I want to. But how would we even make this work? The company has policies. People would talk. Your authority could be undermined." She smiled, that brilliant, problem-solving smile that had built her reputation. "Well, for starters, I've been offered a position as publishing director. Different department, different reporting structure. I'd be overseeing the entire fiction division, not just our team." "You're leaving?" My heart sank, even as I tried to be happy for her advancement. "Moving up," she corrected, tracing her finger along my jawline. "And it would mean I'm no longer directly your boss. We'd be in separate reporting chains." Hope flickered, fragile but persistent. "When does this happen?" I haven't accepted yet. I've been considering it for weeks. She hesitated, suddenly vulnerable in a way I'd never seen. I wanted to be sure. I wanted to be sure I had a reason to stay at Horizon at all. The offer from Penguin was tempting. Penguin tried to poach you? I asked, surprised. 3 times this year, she admitted. I kept saying no, partly because I love what we're building here, and partly because. She trailed off, looking almost shy. Because? I prompted. Because of you, she said simply. Because I wanted to see if there was something here worth exploring. I kissed her again, softer this time, trying to convey everything I couldn't put into words. Is that reason enough? Her smile was answer enough. That night changed everything. The Thai food grew cold as we talked for hours, sharing stories and confessions that had nothing to do with manuscripts or deadlines. I learned that she played violin, that she had a weakness for terrible reality TV shows, that she'd backpacked through Europe alone after college. She learned about my failed attempts at writing a novel, my collection of vintage typewriters, my complicated relationship with my traditional Chinese parents who still didn't understand why I hadn't become a doctor. The next day, Eliza accepted the publishing director position. We disclosed our relationship to HR, endured the knowing looks from colleagues who claimed they saw it coming all along, they hadn't, and began the complicated, wonderful process of getting to know each other outside the office. It wasn't easy. We had disagreements about boundaries, about when work stayed at work and when it came home with us. We had to prove ourselves twice as professional at the office to counter any whispers of favoritism. There were nights I wondered if we'd made a mistake, if some lines existed for good reasons. But then there were the other moments. Eliza laughing until tears streamed down her face as I tried and failed to cook her favorite dish, setting off every smoke alarm in my apartment. The look of concentration on her face as she read manuscripts late into the night, glasses perched on her nose, a smudge of ink on her cheek. The way she knew exactly when to push me professionally and when to just listen. The night she told me about losing her father the year before and how it had driven her relentless work ethic, her voice breaking as she admitted she was afraid of disappointing his memory. 6 months after that first kiss, we moved in together, merging our book collections in a way that felt more intimate than sharing a bed. A year later, I proposed in the elevator where we first met, getting down on one knee as other employees awkwardly tried to pretend they weren't watching. She said yes before I even finished asking, pulling me to my feet and kissing me as the doors opened on the lobby, revealing our entire cheering department who'd been tipped off by my co-conspirator at the front desk. Today, Eliza is the CEO of Horizon, having transformed the company into an industry leader that champions diverse voices and experimental formats. I've started my own editing consultancy, working with debut authors who need the kind of guidance I wish I'd had when I was trying to write. We still have boundaries, we never edit each other's work, for instance, but we've found our balance. Sometimes I think about that version of me from 2 years ago, the one who spent 6 months running away from the best thing that ever happened to him. I wish I could tell him that sometimes the complications, the risks, the messy human connections, they're worth it. That sometimes what looks like an impossible situation is actually the beginning of something beautiful. If you're watching this and there's someone you've been avoiding because it's complicated, because the timing seems wrong, because you're scared, maybe it's time to stop running. Maybe it's time to walk toward that closed door and see what happens when it opens. Or in my case, when it locks. Life rarely gives us perfect timing or uncomplicated choices. Sometimes the most meaningful paths are the ones that seem most daunting. Sometimes the person who intimidates.